Hello, I am Peter Freer. I am founder and creator of Play Attention, and we are here to see ADHD IQ Unlocked, what you need to know. We are going to talk about ADHD executive function and how to strengthen them. And my background, by the way, is actually in education. Initially, I was a classroom teacher, teaching both adults and children, and I encountered many of them that had ADHD. Background in physics, background in computer science, computer programming, mathematics, physics, and I decided to take those skills and create Play Attention. And that's why I am here. I've been doing this for well over 35 years, and Play Attention has also been here for well over uh, 30 years now in various forms. So in today's presentation, we want to take a look at the agenda and see what we're going to cover. We will look at the ADHD questions that are often confusing to people because even when I was reviewing this, there were some in there I actually did not have correct answers to. We also need to discuss what is attention because that is the basis for ADHD, isn't it? It's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, but there's so much more than attention. But we don't even know what attention is for the most part. I would just suggest that almost everyone here has a concept of what it might be or what it could be, but today we'll actually talk about what it is. And we'll talk about the importance of separating myth from fact and the consequences of perpetrating myth. So we don't want to, or perpetuating myth. We don't want to be doing that because it has consequences. What happens when we get it right, and why attention deficit isn't the full story. It's not only the full story, it's really the wrong name for what we're talking about. How do we better frame executive function challenges so that we can actually make some changes internally? So we will provide some solutions as well at the end and how executive function affects our daily lives. And then we'll talk about real solutions that work. So when we think about what attention is, and we're trying to think of what this thing actually is that is attention. It is the glue that binds our lives together. And that's one major aspect of it. It is the glue that binds our lives together. Now, what does that mean? That means that every night sky we ever look at, every moon, full moon, half moon, quarter moon that we look at, every sunset, every kiss, all of those things get reduced into images and movies, smells, sounds, feelings, and tastes. And they're held together by this glue we call attention. And it creates who we are. You have a movie as to who you are internally, and it starts when your parents named you. And so this is what attention actually does for us in life. It binds all of these moments together. We bind them together initially when we experience them, when we experience, sitting out under the stars, when we experience a classroom lesson, our first love, all of that kind of thing. Those all get minimized in the brain to the networks of attention and the networks that have those memories binding together. Now, if you have, as in attention deficit, you have a diffused attentive state most of the time, that you're fleeting from one thing to the next very quickly. It means you have more incomplete memories and fewer memories. And if you have a child that has ADHD, then you'll know that you've probably tried to work with them on multiplication tables at one time or the other. And you had them perfectly that evening when you went through all the flashcards. And the next day they take a test. And it was as if you never had that session with them. Does anyone identify with that here? Or you can raise your hand if you can identify with that moment happening in your life. And that you often wonder, why they keep repeating the same things over and over again. Did they not pay attention last time? This is very, very common for all people who encounter you. Maybe your spouse, maybe your partner, um, maybe your school children. But we often experience this because attention is fleeting. Now, it isn't that they have a deficit, and we'll go into this in greater detail later. They don't really have a deficit of attention. They've got plenty of it. The problem is that it is diffused all the time. So I would often ask a student when I was teaching grade school, I asked the student, what's going on in class? Can you tell me about today's lesson? Well, they could tell me a little bit about today's lesson, but they could tell me about the birds sitting outside the window. They could tell me a little bit about what was happening in the hall and a little bit about what the student next to him was whispering to the student next to him. So they have a great amount of attention. They just are not able to uh, focus it at will. They don't really have that capability, a strong capability for it. So if we give attention context, it's the brain's active engagement and allocation of neural resources to a stimulus or task. The ability for the brain to engage, just as you're trying to right now with me on this side of the camera. Your brain is trying to stay engaged to this, and you're dedicating energy, internal resources, right? You're allocating energy to this, and you're allocating the time necessary to listen to all of this. And the more attentive you are, the more you can learn, the more you can take away, right? And the more you cause your brain to change based on the information you're being given right now. We gave out a quick ADHD quiz, and all the participants were pretty darn smart. But so we selected 3 out of these that we had sent through to many people, a few thousand people in email. And I'm going to give you the top 3 questions, and you can tell me what the answer is when we ask the question to you. And let's see what your IQ is right here. All right. Question 1. Is ADHD considered a learning disability? This should be easy for everyone to answer. At least we thought it would be. So can everyone, all of the yeses say yes? And raise your hand for that. All the no's say no. Okay, wow, okay. So the majority of us here don't know the right answer to this. So the answer actually is, and a few of us actually had it. Congratulations to those of you who said no. It is not considered a learning disability. And this one actually confused me because as a teacher, I thought, it's a specific learning disability. But when you look at the law associated with it, according to the Learning Disabilities Association of America, it's not classified as a learning disability. It can qualify as a disability under the IDEA, right? The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or Section 504, if it significantly impacts major life functions like learning, such as learning. So by definition, no, you are not subject to a learning disability, but it can qualify. And that's why you have to go in, and if you have a child that has been labeled ADHD, you should know what this means, and you can go to the school and get accommodations if they are having real major impact on learning in the classroom. So really, it falls under the category of other health impaired, not specific learning disability. Question from Britt. Would executive functions and memory issues not be considered a disability? That's interesting. And this is the way that you must pose it when you go to the school to try to get accommodations, or if you're an adult and you need accommodations. you must pose it that under the IDEA, it has impacted your ability to work or to learn, or your child's ability to learn. If it has impacted that, and you can provide evidence of that, then, and the teacher will probably back you, then you can go under the category of other health impaired and get accommodations. Typically, that's the way one would do it. But it's intelligent to be well informed of what the correct answer is and what your rights are under that. Question 2. Can ADHD be caused by trauma or hormonal changes like menopause? This is a good question, right? Can ADHD be caused by trauma or hormonal changes? All in favor of saying yes, say yes. Okay, all opposed, say no. Okay, we are about 50-50 on this one. So the correct answer is no. In our online poll, 32% answered yes. So they don't cause it, right? While trauma and hormonal shifts can increase the symptoms, they do not cause ADHD. They are not causes. All right. And so what we have to do is just try to think clearly about it. All right. Britt says, can head injury cause ADHD? ADHD is actually, you're born with it. It is most likely a genetic predisposition. So TBI doesn't necessarily cause ADHD. It can have symptoms that look like ADHD because your memory is affected, your ability to concentrate is affected, but it is not technically the same as being born with ADHD. That's a really good question. I am a martial artist. I've been teaching martial arts for 40 some years. And one of my students was in the UFC. That's that crazy thing where they get into the cage and they throw knees and elbows and strikes with their hands and feet and grapple. And I begged him not to do it because and what I said was, um, you'll have 15 minutes of glory and a lifetime of misery. And he has come back and he is brain damaged. So we use play attention with him to get him back everything that he lost during that trauma he took to that traumatic brain injury that he got during that session. Many years of training and many years of being in the UFC. So he has had an incredible recovery, but it took 2 years of work having TBI. Question 3. This will be the last question in this little mini quiz, I think. Is ADHD more common in boys than girls? Now, all in favor say yes. Interesting. We are about 50-50 on this. We're about 50-50. That's interesting. Let's talk about what the answer actually is. The correct answer is no. What has happened is, I asked, this is my favorite comment. Ask the wrong question, you get the wrong answer. The question was, is it more prevalent in boys? And the answer really is no, because there are different types of ADHD. But as you're probably aware, as a parent or teacher, Mary says, well, they daydream. That's it. They live in a separate world, a world that's internal. Girls generally, right? They don't become the annoyances boys are to the teacher. The boys are the squeaky wheels. They're class clowns. They call out. They act out because they're very impulsive. Whereas girls just have an attentive type, which is suffering in silence. They're just not diagnosed because they're not a problem. Although they never do, incredibly well at school. They oftentimes struggle a bit. But even if they do well, it's because they are fighting their hardest um, to try to accommodate mom to and dad to say I can do this. I am a good student because they are intelligent, but they have to fight twice as hard. So boys are more frequently diagnosed, and research shows this, that it's almost 2 to 1. And you can see that down on the fourth bullet point there, fifth bullet point. It's about 2 to 1. But and that kind of indicates the girls are only half as likely to receive the diagnosis. That's true. But doctors think that due to underdiagnosis, because the girls have a different type of ADHD, an attentive type, they may be just as likely to have ADHD as boys do. So when they say, well, boy, if you go back and you listen to the media, and the media says, well, boys are more often identified than girls. Well, that's absolutely true. Does that mean girls do not have it as much? No. It means girls don't get diagnosed as much because they have a much different type. And it is unfortunate because if you have a young daughter and you've seen her struggle, yet she can't get the diagnosis or hasn't been diagnosed, that it's heartbreaking, heart-wrenching as a parent to watch this intelligent little girl struggle, and when she doesn't have to, just because she has a different type of attention problem, right? So I hope this is making sense to everyone, all right? Brett says we tend to hide the struggle more. Absolutely. I mean, you don't want to be called lazy. You don't want to be called stupid. You don't want to be called just indifferent or you don't care. You struggle really and try twice as hard, 3 times as hard as everyone else. And this is unfortunate because we don't have to do this. This is what I said I created Play Attention. I did that because of a little boy named John that was given to me. I think he was a third or fourth grader when I got him. And it was heartbreaking to watch John because the other teachers came to me, and I was the only male in that grade level. So the principal brought him to me and said, "Hey, you're going to have John C. We'll call him John C." And the other teachers have had it with him up to this point. You're a male, give him some discipline, make certain he's going to work. And I was like, well, what's the problem? He said, well, the kid can't pay attention. And at this point, this was like early 1980s, maybe 1983 or 84. And I had to go back to university and ask the professors, this kid has this problem with attention. What do I do? And I think it had just circled its way out of being called minimal brain dysfunction. They said, move him closer to your desk so you have this ability to create a relationship, a proximity control with him, and give him an individualized education plan. And we were doing incredibly well by doing that. I created his own curriculum, things that he was weak in. I emphasized. We worked closely together because he's next to me all day long. So I taught him how to read better, taught him mathematics, and he was doing so much better. And then one day he came in and he put his head down on the desk. And this was unusual because he was a hellion. I mean, he was so energetic and he was funny. We had a great rapport. And I said, are you sick? What's going on? And he looks up at me and his eyes are bloodshot. And I said, so you're sick? He goes, no, I'm on medicine. I said, you're on medicine for what? You said you're not sick. My mom gives it to me. I said, she gave you medicine for what? I don't know. Doctor said I needed it. So they had put him on Ritalin and they couldn't get his dosage correct. So this kid who was once funny and active never could handle it. And his head was down. He'd stare off into space, and it broke my heart because this is not the little boy who was just a good little boy who had attention issues. Came to find out when I talked to his mom and dad, we're in North Carolina in the country. And at that time, to solve problems with inattention and lack of discipline, his father used the strap on him. And that was normal practice at that point. And of course, John wasn't going to change for a strap. John had attention deficit disorder and didn't help him. And so I vowed at that point I was going to use all of my resources, my physics, my mathematics, my computer science, all of this was going to go into creating something that would help John. Now, I struggled, worked 3 jobs, 6 days a week for 8 or 9 years to create Play Attention. In that time, I watched John struggle and then drop out of the school system and then get arrested for self-medicating. Yeah, he was on drugs, and then go to jail. And I don't know where he is right now. I really don't. I hope he's still alive, and it's got to be. It's a long time ago. It's 40 or 50 years ago. So there is no telling what has happened to him. But that was the motivation behind Play Attention, because this does not have to happen. This just does not. We do not have to subject kids to this, to where they have no idea how to cope. And medication doesn't help you cope. Medication does not give you skills. And that's what's lacking. And that's why we started Play Attention. Sorry to go off and digress like that. It's just when we talk about it, to me, it's very personal. And I'm certain to most of you here, it's very personal, because either your own story, or a child's story, or a spouse's story, or a friend's story. All this, and there is no way that we have to continue to do that, to let it just fester or cause people to fail. All right, so let's give you a quick pop quiz. All right, and let's see how much you know, and how good your ADHD IQ is. ADHD is caused by too much sugar or food dyes. Is that true? Mary says no. Brad says no. All the panel. Okay. That is 100% fake. Yes, that's false. Now, do they have an effect? They can have effects, right? They may trigger symptoms. They may exacerbate symptoms, and they may not have no effect on your childhood. But is it caused by it? Absolutely no. Okay. And we mentioned this just a little bit earlier. ADHD is just really laziness. Anybody saying true on that one, or false? Or yeah, everybody's totally spot on. No one answered true. It's all false. But do you hear it? Now how many people hear that? Maybe from a teacher, from a coach. He's just too lazy. Anybody heard that? Yeah. And that is a lack of understanding. And that's one of the reasons we do these webinars, is so that we can make certain people everywhere actually know what is true and what is not, right? It's important to know, right? Is it only for kids? Right? Is it ADHD only in juveniles? Good. Keep them coming. You're doing great. Everybody's passing this really well. The answer again is false on this one. It happens typically, you'll realize it, or it will be acknowledged at youth, and it starts in your youth. But it will, with probably 90% of the kids, will take it into adulthood. So what happens to that 10% that don't seem to have the symptoms? Well, they're there, but they are coped. They have a coping mechanism that helps them get around it. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. So this one is, Joan is saying, is chat receiving questions? It is. And I will try to answer your questions as they pop up, but most likely I'll have to attend to them at the end of the webinar. So it's okay to ask them, but if you can save them till the end of the webinar, that would be best, so that I can address them at that time directly to you. Also, we are recording this, so you'll get a recording of this. so that if you need to play it for a teacher, you need to play it for grandma and grandpa that don't understand why your child is like this. Uh, Let them have a look at it. So we'll send that a copy to you or a link for a copy so that you can all watch this again. All right. This ADHD disappears at a certain age. We all know that's, if we know it's not only for kids, we know this is pretty much the same question, shelved, posed just a little bit differently. But obviously, it doesn't disappear. We can learn to cope, and we can learn how to become better at doing certain things. And that is called neuroplasticity. I'll talk about that as well. ADHD is caused by poor parenting. This is one of my favorites. All right. Is this true or is this false? ADHD is caused by poor parenting. Yeah, everyone else here has gotten it. Perfect. Thank you. This is also false. All right. And let's talk about this just a little bit. Poor parenting does not cause it, right? But poor parenting can exacerbate the symptoms. And remember me just moments ago talking about John? Well, at home, John was disobedient to his dad. His dad didn't have the skills to manage John so that he wouldn't be disobedient, that he could get John to help rather than, fight. He didn't have the skills. So he beat John with his belt. And that is going to exacerbate those symptoms. It's going to make the relationship with John worse. It's going to exacerbate his symptoms. And you see, when I talked about John's later life, what that led to for John. Is that making sense? Had a good question. I think it was Mary that posed this. Mary said, is it a mental illness? It is defined as in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual for the American Psychological Association as a mental illness. And I actually don't believe that. I don't see it as a mental illness. It is a lack of some executive function skills, but can it be fixed by cognitive behavioral therapy? Can it be fixed by rewiring the brain? Absolutely. We've done this for 30 some years. So while it is mentioned as a mental illness, that has some benefits to it. I mean, because it can help us get some resources that we need. But calling a child mentally ill because they have certain weaknesses in their executive function is a little bit drastic for me. I'm not supportive of that. So let's get to ADHD and the root of it, right? And if we understand it, and I think up to this point, you may agree with me, just in the quizzes and the information we've received up to this point, we understand more about ADHD now. We understand some facts, we understand some myths, but the more we understand, more clearly we can think about it, and the more clearly we can make decisions regarding what to do. So we really wanted to look at facts and myths, and then why it's important to be able to discern them, and then talk about it cogently with another parent, with grandma and grandpa who oftentimes don't understand this at all, to talk about it with a teacher so that we can get accommodations. This is the importance of understanding myths and facts, and also the consequences associated to propagating myths. All right, so first myth is it is just a childhood disorder. And we discussed this in questions prior to this today. It is not just a childhood disorder. It follows us into adulthood. As a matter of fact, I can't remember who you are, but I saw you say, I'm 74 and I've got it. You've had it all your life. If you have ADHD, you've had it all your life. And at 74, you're probably saying, you know what? I can live differently. And there is, as a matter of fact, Play Attention has just created a subdivision called Silver Mines. Silver mines, MIDS, instead of a silver mine that you'd pull silver ore out of. These are silver mines. And Silver Mines is dedicated to adults who are discovering they have ADHD in later life or going into cognitive decline. So even though you've just and Carol says, I'm 80 and still have it. Well, if you are interested in silver mines, you should let us know, because there is a whole program dedicated to seniors built on 5 different pillars. It's much different than just play attention. They use play attention in it for the neurocognitive training, but there's movement, mindfulness, community. You may notice as you get older, if you have attention issues and cognitive decline, you tend to isolate yourself. The brain does not stay healthy doing that. So community, there so much in there. So it's very important. And Mary is saying, I'm unorganized, can't get help. I have cerebral palsy too. I'm 71, interested in how to fix this. So stay with me. We'll work with you on all of this. The fact of the matter is, it doesn't go away when you turn 18. For many of the symptoms, they shift, but they don't vanish. Around 90% of those diagnosed in childhood still experience symptoms, just like we've heard from a couple of folks that are here today into adulthood who are 70 and 80. And these are related to executive function like memory, time management, and emotional regulation. I think Mary said that she has problems with organization. That's an executive function skill. What happened to that 10%? Well, they still have the symptoms, but they've learned coping skills and how to kind of ease around them. But you can do more than that. You can actually stay cognitively vital. Number 2, ADHD is just poor parenting. We already cited this as a myth, but we want to make certain that we come to certain conclusions. And this is what I mentioned with John. Poor parenting creates a cycle. And you notice these blue boxes here follow this cycle. So it doesn't cause it. That's the first slide right here, the first blue box. Poor parenting does not cause ADHD. Poor parenting in the second slide can increase stress for both parents and children, right? The child. This is also what I mentioned with John, the fellow that helped me invent Play Attention, that motivated me to work 3 jobs 6 days a week so that I could afford to put it all together. Poor parenting can exacerbate ADHD symptoms, which is what John's father did by beating him with a belt, and his mom just standing idly by and not correcting that behavior from his father, and consequently less effective parenting. So beating a child with a strap, we think nowadays, is not good parenting. I have to agree with that. That leads to children that have ADHD. They struggle with emotional regulation and behavior. These are all parts of executive function. So executive function, for those who are newbies here, executive function essentially is a catch-all phrase for a group of skills that we use every day. Organization is part of executive function. And executive function, you can think of like executive function being the conductor in an orchestra. If you've ever been to a symphony and you've listened before the conductor comes out, the players are tuning their instruments. They're playing little pieces from tonight's program, that night's program. They're talking to the person next to them. They're shuffling their music, getting organized, trying to. But there is no music happening. But when the conductor comes out and taps the baton, puts his hands up or her hands up, all of a sudden the players all fire in synchrony. And that synchrony we call music. Now, when these individual parts of the brain, the individual networks of the brain are doing that all day long, each one is doing its shuffling, its music, it's practicing in its brain a melody here. It's It's tuning its instrument, and so these are the things that are going through our brain constantly when we have ADHD all the time. But when we have a strong conductor who taps that baton and we can coordinate all of these, we have attention, we have good behavior, we have organization. So it is a matter of training these skills. And the brain is very neuroplastic, that it will reshape and mold as you train it. Now, it does take work. It takes repetition, takes work, takes consistency, but we can do it. But the fact of the matter is that poor parenting does not cause ADHD, but it can lead to problems associated with behavior and emotion regulation as well. Myth 3, people with ADHD cannot focus. We know that's a myth. They can actually hyperfocus, right? They can get to a point where they focus intensely. We call that hyperfocus. So that's actually a good skill to have if you've not, but one of the other skills they lack is being able to have good time management. So if they have a project to do, an ADHD person will wait till the night before and then try to finish it all at once. And they hyper focus to do it. And sometimes they can actually do it well. And yes, Anea, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Yes, we'll talk a little bit more about Silver Minds at the very end, and you can get information on how to join Silver Minds. Yes, thank you for your interest. And there are a lot of us here, you'll find, that are in that age where this is super important to us. And I'll talk about that again at the end. So hyperfocus is possible. The real challenge is directing attention where and when it's needed, especially if the task is boring or overwhelming. So schoolwork, that's hard, right? Listening to the teacher, that's difficult. Trying to meet the challenges of finishing homework, that's difficult because my attention, unless that is super interesting to me, is not on this particularly. It's on several different things. So sustaining attention is also important, but it's very difficult. And this is why executive function is the key. The key to have that conductor when I need that conductor to help tap that baton, and I get in the right mental state to be able to learn, to attend, to be engaged. Number 4, people with ADHD are lazy. That is a huge myth, but you hear it propagated by, I've heard teachers still say it, that he's just lazy. He's not got ADHD, he's just lazy. Or I'll hear a coach, look, get off your butt. You're lazy. Do the work. So it isn't laziness. It is a lack of executive function skills that help us task initiate, right? To start a task, stay with it, and finish it. That is an executive function. It's called time on task. This one is especially frustrating. ADHD is not about laziness. Telling someone with ADHD to try harder, and this is something that I keep mentioning to folks because it's understandable, it's relatable. You can tell an ADHD person who doesn't have these skill sets to try harder, right? And it's like telling someone who's nearsighted, just see better, will you? Just see better. It's not going to happen, isn't it? They have to have tools, right? If you're nearsighted, you have to have some glasses, LASIK, contact lenses, some tool to help you do better. ADHD is like that. A tool to help them do better is something like training, neurocognitive training. And this is what I developed 30 years ago. It's about difficulty getting started, staying organized, and finishing tasks, all functions of executive function, right? Executive control, all part of executive function. So why is it important to separate facts and myths and be able to talk about it really carefully and kindly? Why is this important? Well, it's important because they're not just annoying. Myths are harmful. I want to talk about that a little bit. When we have misconceptions about ADHD, then people will not get diagnosed. It leads to shame because if you tell a child he's lazy, you tell him that long enough, he's going to really believe you. And then he won't do anything. You'll change him entirely. Why would I need to do that? You say I'm lazy, you know I'm not going to do it. Clean my room? No, I'm not going to. Yeah. They just start using it as an excuse. It stops people from getting the support they need because they're shamed. So myth is quite harmful. If we believe ADHD is caused by sugar or bad parenting, then we don't look at the root cause, which is a brain-based difference in executive function. That means missed opportunities, lower self-esteem, unnecessary suffering. And for some of you here who are in your 70s and 80s, you know this goes on for many years. Make sense? So Brad said, can you talk, or Britt said, can you talk a little bit on how manipulation regarding gaslighting affects ADHD students? You know, if you say it long enough and you tell them that um, if they're not, you don't say they're lazy. You just say, oh, you have ADHD. You got to clear this up. After a while, they begin to use it as an excuse and they don't feel that they have to do anything. You're changing their self image and they feel that they're not as intelligent. And typically, they are as intelligent or more intelligent than their peers. But by telling them these things and creating the myths and propagating nonsense, then they actually can begin to believe, right? You have a self-fulfilling prophecy granted to them. You've got ADHD. Don't worry about it. You'll never get that. But it's not true. We know that this is harmful. And the way to actually, what I did with John is to find out what really interested him. When I created his individualized education plan, I found out what really John liked to do. And when I found that out, I could focus on getting him interested based on those things. And that is the primary function of a good teacher, is that you have to find that for each student, right? Because it's difficult enough learning the curriculum that we have to do in North Carolina or any state, but you have to figure out, determine, ascertain what it is that is going to spark this child's brain to move in a direction I need it to move. And that's key. So gaslighting and telling them nonsense really just creates a harmful atmosphere where they don't feel they can do anything. Right? We don't want to head in that direction. It's not good. We have to find what motivates them. We have to find and help them understand what's happening so that we can help them make change. So what are the common consequences? And this is part of the gaslighting question. Girls, if we keep saying, it's more common in boys, well, girls and women go undiagnosed. Almost there are people here today who've been undiagnosed for their entire life. Adults think their struggles are personal flaws. I knew people who would not even leave their houses because they felt that they were not worth it. And this was all from being ADHD. And that, they struggled with relationships, eventually lived alone. You can see there is a cycle here, and it's tragic. It's very tragic. So we don't want to push people in that direction. They think that it is my personality that is bad, when in fact they may have low social skills. Right? That's part of this as well, being able to recognize cues. In Play Attention, we actually have a social cues program to help with that. Parents feel blamed instead of supported, right? How many times have you heard as a parent, you just don't have enough discipline. You're just not shaping that kid right, right? You got to be more strict. Well, if you've ever struggled with an ADHD child for 2 hours for a 20-minute homework assignment, you know this is not true. You're a good parent. You try your best. You have to have the tools to be able to do it and not pull your hair out. Right. So parents often feel blamed. And many times I would hear that from grandparents blaming the parent. It's really your fault. He wouldn't be like this if you did this. Teachers misread behavior as defiance or laziness if they're not aware, right, of the myths to all of this. People internalize the idea that they're not trying hard enough, even though the fact is most of the people who have ADHD that I have talked to try 2 to 3 times as hard as everyone else. They work 3 times as hard because they have such a difficult time trying to keep up and get things done. And they want to please the boss. They want to please their partner. And they're trying so hard. And then to get a repeated failure, because oftentimes they can't do it all. It's very difficult. When we don't have accurate information, we just don't understand ADHD. We misunderstand the people who live with it. And this is the other reason for having this particular conversation today, so that we all are on the same page and that everyone here leaving today can talk about it intelligently with other people and not get angry, because sometimes it really will irritate you to hear some of this nonsense. But we stay calm and we are able to talk about it rationally and help people understand what is actually factual, not myth-based, but factual. Right. So the progress we've seen when we get this right, and this is one of those things up front that I had labeled. What happens when we get it right? So this is what it means. When we actually understand the myths, we actually understand what the problem is, the root cause, then more girls and more women are properly being identified right now. This has happened. So the rates of actually identification of ADHD have gone up progressively. But in a way, that's a good thing, that we now know what our executive function weaknesses are and how we've recognized them, we fix them. It's that simple. It takes work to do that. That's not simple. It takes work to do it, but you can do it. Adults are recognizing symptoms they've lived with for years. And this has been validated throughout this, because we've had people popping up in the chat saying, oh, yeah, I understand this. Lived with this for the last 70 years. So they're recognizing now what this is finally, but they've lived with it and suffered in silence for years before they've understood it. Schools are adopting better support models. Now, not all schools. It just depends on the district you're in. Some schools that understand this now are adopting better modules. Some just ignore it. And you have to be, if you have a child who has been labeled, you have to be that child's number one advocate when you go to school. Because oftentimes the schools just don't have the resources, or they don't have the desire at all to deal with it. And they won't do anything for you. I've seen that. But then you have a great school. You come in, they say, oh, we can do this, let's make a plan. That's what you really want to hear when you go into a school. But you also have to be very understanding of their position as well and meet them in the middle. What we've also seen is that shame is replaced with a strategy and support. And that's what we do in Play Attention. We have super support. There is a strategy that has to be initiated. We have to keep you consistent. That's all part and parcel of this. Even if you're on your own, you have to have a strategy. You have to have a support network. You will not be able, likely, you'll be unable to do this by yourself. All right? Why attention deficit isn't the full story. And I've mentioned this slightly at different intervals in today's webinar. Number one, the term attention deficit hasn't done us any favor. It's a wrong name. They don't have a deficit of attention. We know they have plenty of attention and they can hyper-focus attention, but the executive function skill of being able to manage and direct it is weaker than it should be. Weaker than is necessary to be successful in school. So the name itself is misleading. When they hear attention deficit, they just think, ah, he can't focus. Well, that's not true, is it? So we want to make certain we don't get wrapped up in this, when parents say, oh, right, he can't focus, makes him lazy. And then you just have to, smile and say, no, he has the ability to hyper focus. Well, say, well, I've seen him play video games for 2 hours. He can focus. Well, if it's incredibly highly stimulating, yes, their brain is maxed out. They're driving a Ferrari up here. They have to go full throttle to be engaged. If it's not up to that level of excitement, stimuli, no teacher can do that, you don't get their full attention. And of course, we talked about the necessity of attention right at the very beginning of this webinar. So when a child can focus on a video game, you can respond by saying his brain is equipped for that. His brain is not equipped for that in a classroom. It's not equipped to do that in a classroom. By the way, treating video games as one would treat dessert is the way they should be seen. Video games in themselves, high stimuli, high action, point and click, shoot, do all of that kind of thing, are not beneficial. They encourage shorter memory, shorter attention spans. Same with doom scrolling. It encourages less attention and less memory and less learning. It is so unhealthy. Treat it as one would dessert, right? You wouldn't sit and eat a whole cake at one time. Maybe you'd have a slice for dessert a couple of days a week, but you wouldn't eat the cake all at one time. That's what using a video game is like. All right, I'll stop on that one. It isn't about lack of attention. It's about difficulty regulating attention. People with ADHD can hyperfocus on highly stimulating or rewarding things. The real issue is inconsistent control over when, where, and how attention is used. Now, after all of that, this last one, the real issue is inconsistent control over when, where, and how attention is used. Who is in charge of that? Do you remember the person with the baton? So who's in charge of where, when, and how? It is the conductor. And the conductor is called executive function. Making sense? Is it tying it together for you? Executive function challenges. This is why many professionals now prefer to talk about ADHD as a disorder of executive function, not just attention. I prefer this. It gives us a far better understanding when we talk about it as a disorder of executive function, not just attention. Executive function is the brain's ability to manage tasks, as I just went through with you, right? I just discussed. Managing tasks, control impulses, shift focus, regulate emotions, and your follow through. That's the real struggle, and that's where the real support needs to happen. For people with these issues, it's often underdeveloped, but they're absolutely trainable. And these are the core. There are a few more than this, but being able to have mental flexibility, to be able to change when you need to change and not get put out just because you're making a change. Regulate my emotions rather than going into a complete meltdown upon something minor. Working memory, the ability to take in memory and then manipulate it in my head. Mathematics, for knowing how to use my multiplication tables. Inhibitory control, so I don't actually just impulsively eat the whole cake. Organization and prioritization, as we mentioned, big skills that we need to be able to function daily. Task initiation, so I don't procrastinate. Self-monitoring, so I can just check to make certain I'm doing certain things. These are all portions of executive function. And when executive function's in control, it's the conductor tapping that baton and allowing all of these pieces to play together at one time. Then we have, in an orchestra, it would be music. In real life, we'd have good executive function and live happily. Here's the airport analogy, and this is pretty darn good. Imagine your brain, instead of using a conductor now, we're looking at it like an airport. Imagine your brain is like an airport. Planes are constantly coming in, going, thoughts, emotions come in and leave, tasks come in. I either do them, I don't do them, I get distracted, I have other responsibilities, I do, and I'm paying attention to all of this at one time. So executive function is the air traffic control tower. The control tower makes these decisions. Which planes take off? Start the tasks, right? Which planes land safely? They complete the tasks. Which ones get delayed? They pause distractions. Right? How do I redirect traffic when storms roll in? That's emotion regulation. How to coordinate everything so there are no mid-air collisions? Well, that's mental flexibility and adaptability. So you can look at executive function just like the control tower in an airport. I hope I just have given you a couple of these so you kind of get the grasp of what executive function is in different metaphors or analogies. When executive function is struggling and planes circle the airport endlessly, you can't finish tasks, right? Some crash into each other because we get overwhelmed and we're frustrated. Important ones get forgotten on the runway. So we miss deadlines. We lose items. You may hyper focus on one plane and forget the others are even there. So that is a sign that your executive function is struggling. And I hope you understand the metaphors that we're using. How executive function essentially is when it's weak, we see struggles with completing homework, arriving on time, cleaning or managing emotions. It shows up at school, work, and home. All of you are probably aware of this. Strengthening executive function. Can the brain change? How many people here say it can? How many people say it can't? How many people are for can? The brain can make changes. Anybody here in agreement with that? Hand up. Good. Yep. Yeah, the majority of you are answering and you're saying, yeah, absolutely can. This is called neuroplasticity. The most remarkable aspect about the human brain is it will rewire itself for you. You have to give it the correct stimulation, right? But it's kind of like learning a basic recipe in the kitchen, right? If you don't know that recipe, you will read it and then you'll perform it. And then after a while, if you repeat that enough, it becomes your recipe. Now, can I do that at age 6, age 5, age 4, age 3, age 2? Yes. Can I do it at age 101, 102, 103, 104? The answer to that is also yes. So at any age, the brain will readjust provided you go ahead and do the work to do it. Now, that's when you think about that, that's called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire. But when you think about it, that is a self-changing organ. It's remarkable that it can do it, but it can do it. And that's not me saying that. That's science over the last 60 years. While medication can help some people, long-term improvement often comes from building executive function directly. Play attention combines cognitive training, feedback, behavioral shaping to help the brain learn what it feels like to focus and then also learn new executive functions or strengthen executive functions. Improve your goals. By the way, there is an ADHD test on our website at playattention.com. You can take it there and see how you do in that and see what executive functions that you really need to explore right there on the page. It's free. You can click it and try it out. Understanding ADHD is powerful, and that's why we had this meeting together today. I think everyone here is going to walk away going, I know more now than I did before. I understand now more than I did before. What is so powerful is that if you get the right support and training, it is life-changing. So if you intend to do that, we'd love to be part of that with you. Again, thank you so much. Everyone take care, and we'll talk to you soon. And look forward to changing your life. Thank you again. Take care.